The Xilari had once been a proud and powerful race. They lived on a planet covered in lush forests and sparkling oceans, their cities towering with advanced technology that many other species in the galaxy admired. They were peaceful, wise, and skilled in science and diplomacy, often offering help to those in need. But everything changed when their star began to die. The Xilari's homeworld, Sealer, was on the brink of destruction. Their sun, once bright and stable, had begun to show signs of instability. Scientists had warned them for centuries, but the government had always been in denial. Now, the disaster was too big to ignore. Massive solar flares ripped across their sky, causing widespread damage. Cities crumbled, and millions of people were lost. Desperate for help, the Xilari reached out to the Galactic Council, the governing body of the galaxy. The council was made up of dozens of races, some ancient, some young, but all united in the idea that the galaxy must remain in balance. The Xilari were certain the council would come to their aid, just as they had helped other civilizations in the past. However, when their message was sent, the response was not what they expected. Days passed, then weeks, and there was nothing. Not a single word from the council. The Xilari, heartbroken and confused, sent more messages, but they only received silence in return. The harsh truth soon became clear. The Xilari had been abandoned. The other races of the galaxy seemed to have forgotten about them, or worse, had decided that helping them was no longer worth the effort. Some claimed that the Xilari's fate was sealed, and that it was better to leave them to their own destruction. Others were too busy with their own issues to offer aid. As Xilari's skies turned a fiery red, and the world slowly began to die, the Xilari had no one left to turn to. One young leader, Vera Solan, a rising star among the Xilari, refused to give up. She had seen the Xilari's past efforts to help others, and now it was time for them to be helped in return. With little hope, she and a small group of diplomats sent a message to a new and unlikely ally: humanity. Humanity was a relatively young species compared to the ancient races of the galaxy. They were still learning about the vast universe, but their relentless drive and curiosity had led them to explore distant worlds. Humans had fought wars, made enemies, and built alliances. They were unpredictable and often defied the rules of galactic diplomacy. Many species looked down on them, calling them unrefined, stubborn, and too eager to expand their reach. But Vara had heard rumors that the humans were different. They had helped each other survive in harsh conditions on their own planet, and some stories even spoke of their willingness to fight for those who couldn't fight for themselves. While many in the galaxy thought humans were a threat, Vera believed they could be their last hope. With no other options left, the Xilari sent a final, desperate plea. Their message was simple but full of emotion. "We are dying. Will you help us?" The message was sent into the vastness of space, directed toward Earth. Vera had little expectation of a response. The chances were slim. After all, why would the humans care about a race like the Xilari? They were far from the center of galactic power, and their world was on the edge of collapse. The human species had their own struggles, their own wars to fight. However, something unexpected happened. The message reached Earth, and within hours, they received a reply. Vera Solan couldn't believe her eyes when the message arrived. After sending the distress signal to Earth, she had prepared herself for the worst. In her heart, she had already accepted that her people were alone, abandoned by the entire galaxy. She had feared that no one would care about the plight of the Xilari. But to her astonishment, a reply came within hours. The message was simple, but its impact was immense. The humans were responding, not with silence, as the Galactic Council had done, but with action. The reply came from Captain Ilias Carter of the Terran Fleet, a leader known for his no-nonsense approach and relentless pursuit of justice. His message was short, direct, and filled with hope. "We hear you. Help is on the way. Stay strong." It wasn't much, but to Vera and the other leaders of the Xilari, it felt like a lifeline. For the first time in weeks, they felt a flicker of hope. But it didn't stop there. Within hours, the humans sent a fleet of ships toward Sealer's last remaining cities. The fleet was not large, but it was enough to show their seriousness. More messages followed, offering not just assistance, but a promise that the Xelari would not be forgotten. As the human ships approached Xelar, Vera tried to process everything. She had heard stories about humans, about how they were brash, unpredictable, and often too eager to prove themselves. Some of the older Xelari leaders dismissed the humans as chaotic and untrustworthy. But now, in the face of their desperation, those very qualities seemed to make them the perfect allies. The humans didn't follow the usual galactic protocols. They didn't send a delegation of diplomats or wait for permission from the Galactic Council. They simply acted. They didn't waste time with political games. They responded to a call for help. And that was something that Xelari had never experienced before. As the human ships arrived in orbit above Sealar, Vera and her people stood in awe. These ships were not the grand, elegant vessels they were used to from the Galactic Council, with their polished surfaces and elaborate designs. No, the human ships were rough around the edges, their hulls marked with dents and scratches. They were clearly built for practicality, not beauty. But there was something about the way they arrived that caught Vera's attention. The humans didn't arrive in a flashy display of power. Instead, they quietly descended, one ship after another, landing gently on the broken surface of Sealar. The humans moved quickly, setting up camp near the surviving Xelari cities. They offered food, medical supplies, and most importantly, their presence. Captain Carter himself led the first team to land. He stepped out of his ship and, without hesitation, extended a hand to Vera. Her heart raced. She had expected the humans to be distant, to hold themselves above the Xelari in some way. But here was a man who didn't wait for formalities. He didn't act as though he was doing the Xelari a favor. Instead, he simply acted like a fellow sentient being offering help to another. "We don't have much," Captain Carter said, his voice calm but filled with warmth. "But we'll do what we can. You're not alone anymore." Vera hesitated for a moment, but then she took his hand. The gesture was small, but it felt significant. She had never met a human before, but in that instant, she felt something she had never felt from the other races of the galaxy: genuine care. There was no hidden agenda, no strings attached. The humans had simply heard their cry for help and answered without question. Over the next few days, the humans worked alongside the Xelari. They set up makeshift shelters, offered advanced medical treatments, and helped the survivors rebuild their homes. The Xelari watched in disbelief. How could these humans, who had no obligation to help, be so selfless? How could they move so quickly and efficiently, without the need for endless meetings and negotiations? The Galactic Council, on the other hand, still hadn't responded. The Xelari had sent out desperate messages to every corner of the galaxy, but no one had offered to help. The silence from the Council spoke volumes. The Xelari were on their own. But for the first time since the disaster began, Vera felt something she hadn't felt in a long time: hope. She watched as humans and Xelari worked together, side by side, not as conquerors and the conquered, but as equals. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about building something new, something that had never been seen before in the galaxy, a true partnership between two races. As the days passed, Vera found herself trusting the humans more and more. They didn't ask for anything in return. They didn't demand that the Xelari give them something for their aid. All they wanted was to help, to give the Xelari a chance to rebuild. It was a kindness the galaxy had long forgotten, and it was a kindness that would change everything for both the Xelari and humanity. But Vera knew that this was just the beginning. The Xelari were now on Earth's radar, and with the attention of the galaxy's most unpredictable species focused on them, anything could happen next. As the days turned into weeks, the Xelari began to adjust to the presence of the human fleet. At first, there had been skepticism. Some of the older Xilari still questioned the humans' true intentions. How could a species so young, so unpolished, offer anything of real value? But as the work continued, doubts started to fade, and the Xilari began to see the humans in a different light. The humans didn't just offer help, they worked alongside the Xilari. They didn't stand apart, issuing orders or treating the Xilari as weak. They were together in this struggle, as equals. It wasn't a common sight in the galaxy. In most places, aid was given with strings attached, and favors were expected in return. But not with the humans. They asked for nothing in return for their help, and that made a powerful impression. Vera watched closely as Captain Elias Carter and his crew worked tirelessly. Every day, they would patrol the damaged cities, clearing debris, repairing what could be repaired, and providing medical care to those who were hurt. They didn't stop when the work got difficult, and they didn't leave when things got dangerous. They simply stayed and worked harder. This was something that Xilari were not used to. In their culture, diplomacy had always been the answer to every problem. They believed that words could solve all issues, but the humans proved that sometimes actions spoke louder than words. The humans were not talking about solutions, they were creating them. One evening, as the sun set behind the crumbling skyline of Sealar, Vera walked with Captain Carter. The two of them had spent the day visiting survivors in the refugee camps. Vera had been surprised at how many of the human soldiers had taken personal responsibility for the Xilari. They had bonded over shared tasks, simple conversations, and sometimes even laughter. It was clear to her now that the humans weren't just here to fix a problem. They were here to build a relationship. "What made you come here?" Vera asked as they walked slowly along the edge of a broken bridge. "Why did you help us?" Carter glanced at her, a small smile on his face. "It's what we do," he said simply. "We help when we can. Sometimes it's messy, and sometimes we make mistakes, but that's how we learn. Your people are in trouble. We're good at fixing things, so that's what we're going to do." Vera nodded slowly. She had heard stories about humans. Some said they were chaotic, too emotional, too reckless. But here, in front of her, was a man who had led his people across the stars to a distant planet, to a race they had never met before, all because they had asked for help. It wasn't about power. It wasn't about resources. It was about humanity, the simple desire to help others in need. That was something Vera had never encountered before. Days went by, and the bond between the Xilari and humans continued to grow. More human ships arrived, bringing supplies, tools, and even more people eager to help. There were engineers, doctors, soldiers, and even teachers. It wasn't just the fleet that was arriving. It was an entire community of humans ready to stand beside the Xilari. The human soldiers worked with the Xilari scientists, finding ways to prevent the worst of the solar storms. The doctors treated those who were injured or sick, offering care even when the Xilari had no way of repaying them. The engineers helped rebuild the power plants, creating energy where there had once been nothing but darkness. As the weeks passed, the Xilari began to open up. They shared stories of their history, of the great civilizations they had built. They taught the humans about their culture and their ways of life. The humans, in turn, taught the Xilari about Earth and its people. The two races exchanged knowledge freely, without fear or reservation. And in the process, a deep and lasting trust began to form between them. One day, as Vera walked through a newly rebuilt area of the city, she saw a group of young Xilari children playing with human children. The laughter of both groups filled the air, and for a brief moment, Sealar seemed to have hope again. The children didn't care about the differences between their species. They just cared about being together, sharing moments of joy amidst the destruction. Vera paused, watching them play. She felt something stir in her chest, a feeling she hadn't felt in a long time. The Xilari were not alone anymore. They had found something more precious than technology or resources. They had found allies, and even more than that, They had found something they had lost long ago: hope. Later that evening, Captain Carter approached Vera again. "We're not going anywhere," he said with quiet determination. "We're going to stay, as long as you need us." Vera smiled, her heart lighter than it had been in weeks. The humans had come to help, but now they were more than just strangers offering aid. They were partners. They were friends. And together, they would rebuild what had been lost. The road ahead would be difficult, but for the first time in a long time, the Scifi had hope for the future. And as they looked to the stars, they knew that they weren't alone. Not anymore. As time passed, the cooperation between the Scifi and the humans deepened. What had started as a mission of rescue had blossomed into something far greater, a partnership built on mutual respect, shared goals, and the willingness to rebuild together. Vera Solon watched with awe as the Scifi began to heal. Their cities, though still scared from the disaster, were slowly being restored. The humans had helped them rebuild, not just physically but emotionally. The shared work and the deep connection that had formed between the two species had filled the Scifi with a sense of purpose once again. The work was far from easy. Zealer's environment had been ravaged by the solar storms, and much of the planet's infrastructure had been destroyed. But thanks to the humans' advanced technology, the Scifi now had the tools they needed to repair their damaged planet. There were solar farms being constructed, new energy systems being set up, and medical facilities being rebuilt. What once seemed impossible was now becoming a reality. Captain Elias Carter had become a familiar figure among the Scifi, not just as a leader, but as a symbol of hope. His steady presence had reassured the Scifi leaders, and his willingness to get his hands dirty alongside his crew had earned him the admiration of the people. He worked tirelessly, never asking for praise, simply focused on the task at hand, helping the Scifi survive and thrive. One morning, Vera walked with Captain Carter through one of the newly rebuilt districts. The streets were bustling with activity, and the air smelled fresher than it had in weeks. A sense of normalcy was returning to Scifi, and Vera couldn't help but feel a sense of pride in what they had accomplished together. "This is incredible," Vera said, her voice filled with wonder as she looked around at the transformed city. "I never thought we could do this. I never thought we'd have a future." Carter smiled, his eyes focused on the work being done. "It's all about taking the first step. Once you do that, everything else follows. We're here for the long haul, Vera. And so are you. You've got this." Vera had learned a lot from the humans. She had learned that strength wasn't just about power or technology. It was about resilience. It was about never giving up, no matter how difficult the situation became. And the humans had shown her that. Over the next few weeks, more and more Scifi began to participate in the rebuilding efforts. The human teams didn't direct or dictate. Instead, they guided, offering knowledge and tools to help the Scifi rebuild in their own way. The two species worked side by side, not as superiors and subordinates, but as partners. It was a partnership that extended beyond the physical work. It was a partnership in spirit. Vera had never imagined that such a relationship could exist between different races. She had always believed that the galaxy was a place of competition, where each species fought for dominance. But the humans had shown her that cooperation was possible, even between the most unlikely of allies. One evening, after a long day of work, Captain Carter and Vera found themselves sitting outside one of the new medical centers. The sky was clear, and the stars above were shining brightly. It was a rare moment of quiet after the bustle of the day. "You know," Carter said, breaking the silence, "I've been thinking about something. When we first arrived, you were all so cautious. I don't blame you. You didn't know who we were, what we wanted. But now, I think we've learned to trust each other." Vera nodded, her eyes reflecting the stars above. "Yes, we have. At first, I thought the humans were just another species, coming to offer help to gain something for themselves. But now, I see you're different. You helped us because you wanted to, not because you needed anything in return. And that means everything to us." Carter's gaze softened as he looked at her. It means a lot to hear that. We didn't want anything in return, Vera. All we wanted was to see you stand strong again. Vera's heart swelled with emotion. She had seen the humans offer more than just their resources. They had offered their hearts. They had shown the Exilari that kindness and compassion were just as powerful as technology and weapons. The bond they had formed was not based on what they could take from each other, but on what they could give. The stars above them seemed to shine a little brighter as the two sat in quiet reflection, knowing that their work was far from over. There would be challenges ahead, obstacles to overcome, and more hurdles to face. But the one thing they now had, something that no disaster could take away, was hope. The Exilari had been abandoned by the galaxy, left to face their darkest days alone. But the humans had found them. And together, they were building something better. They were building a future where no one would be left behind. As the night deepened, Vera and Carter stood up. The work was never done, and they both had a long road ahead. But for the first time, Vera believed that the Exilari would rise again. Not as a broken people, but as a people with a bright future, thanks to their new human allies. The weeks that followed were some of the busiest yet for the Exilari and their human allies. The planet was slowly but steadily recovering, and the cooperation between the two species had reached new heights. What was once a simple mission to help now felt like a shared journey, one where both sides were equally invested in the future of Xelar. Captain Elias Carter and Vera Solon continued to work together, planning out the next steps for the planet's recovery. The solar storms were lessening, but the damage they had caused still loomed large. There was so much to be done, and no one was willing to rest until it was complete. One of the biggest challenges they faced was the rebuilding of the Xilari power grid. It had been completely destroyed during the storm, leaving large parts of the planet without energy. The Xilari had the knowledge, but their technology was outdated. The humans, on the other hand, had the technology but lacked the understanding of Xilari systems. The task was daunting, but neither the Exilari nor the humans backed down. Every day, humans and Xilari worked together in teams, sharing knowledge and ideas. The humans brought advanced equipment and tools, while the Xilari used their deep understanding of the planet's energy systems. The combination of the two brought results that no one had expected. Vera had never imagined she would see the day when humans and Xilari worked so seamlessly together. At first, there had been so many barriers, cultural differences, misunderstandings, and even simple fear. But now, those walls had come down. In their place, there was something stronger: unity. It wasn't just about building power grids or fixing broken cities anymore. It was about building a future together. A future where both species could thrive, side by side. And as the days turned into weeks, Vera began to feel the weight of that future on her shoulders. On one particularly hot afternoon, Vera found herself standing in the middle of a vast field, watching a team of human engineers and Xilari laborers work together to set up a new solar farm. The sky above was clear, and the ground beneath her feet was firm. It felt like they were truly starting to move forward, step by step. "You know, I never thought we'd see this day," Vera said as Captain Carter approached, wiping sweat from his brow. "I didn't think we'd make it. But look at us now. We're building something together." Carter smiled at her. "It's all about taking one step at a time, Vera. And when we're working together, those steps add up. We're making something real here, something that will last." The sound of machines humming, workers shouting orders, and the steady rhythm of progress filled the air around them. It was a constant reminder of how far they had come. Once, the Xilari had been isolated, their future uncertain. But now, they were not alone. The humans had given them something that could never be taken away: the belief that they could rebuild their world and their hope for tomorrow. As the day wore on, Vera and Carter walked through the site, checking on the progress. They spoke with the workers, offering encouragement and asking for feedback. Every person they met seemed to share the same sense of determination. They had all come to Xelar with one goal: to rebuild, to help, and to create something better than what had been lost. Later that evening, after the work for the day had been completed, the team gathered for a small celebration. The sun was setting, casting a warm glow over the landscape. It was a moment to pause and reflect on the journey they had been on, and the road that still lay ahead. Vera stood with Captain Carter, looking out at the horizon. "This isn't just about repairing what was broken," she said softly. "It's about starting over, creating something new, a new future." Carter nodded, his gaze fixed on the horizon as well. "Exactly. This is just the beginning, Vera. We're creating something new together, and that's something worth fighting for." As the night fell, the sounds of laughter and conversation filled the air as the workers enjoyed a rare moment of rest. The humans and Scifi were no longer strangers. They had become partners, united by a common goal. Together, they had overcome the impossible, and together, they would continue to move forward, no matter what challenges lay ahead. The work was far from done, and there were many more obstacles to face. But for the first time, Vera felt a deep sense of peace. The Scifi had found more than just a savior in the humans. They had found family, and that was something she never thought she'd have again. Weeks turned into months, and the work on Xelar continued without pause. The cities were becoming more livable, the power grid was coming online in new sections, and the once dry fields were starting to bloom again. But even as the planet began to heal, new challenges appeared on the horizon. Vera Solon had seen the changes happening around her. She had witnessed the Xelar grow stronger every day, working hand in hand with the humans. But despite the visible progress, there was always a quiet undercurrent of fear. The Xelar had been abandoned by their allies before. What would stop it from happening again? They had to be ready to stand on their own. Captain Elias Carter had noticed it too. Though the Xelar were more confident and hopeful than before, he could see the wariness in their eyes. It was understandable. Trust wasn't built in a day, and the scars of the past couldn't simply be erased. The humans had come to Xelar to help, but what if they had to leave someday? That day, Carter met with Vera in one of the newly rebuilt fields. They stood together, watching as human and Scifi teams worked side by side to harvest crops that would feed their people. The first fruits of their combined efforts were finally being harvested, and the crops looked healthy. It was a promising sign. "We've come a long way," Carter said, his voice thoughtful. "But I can see it in their eyes. They're still unsure. They wonder how long we'll stay." Vera nodded. "I know. They're scared. They're scared of losing everything again. I think deep down, they're still wondering if we're really here to stay." Carter turned to look at her, his face serious. "We've made a promise, Vera. We're not going anywhere. The work we've started here, the future we've built together, it's for keeps. I won't let them down. We won't let them down." Vera smiled at him, the strength in his words helping ease some of the fear that had been gnawing at her. It wasn't just the humans' technology that was helping the Xelar. It was their unwavering belief in the partnership. The humans had shown the Xelar that the galaxy didn't have to be a cold, indifferent place. There was hope beyond the darkness. That evening, as the sun set behind the mountains, Carter and Vera stood by the rebuilt energy station that now powered several districts of the city. The lights flickered on one by one, casting a soft glow across the land. It was the symbol of their hard work, and it was proof of what could be accomplished when different species came together. "I never thought I'd see a day like this," Vera said quietly, her voice filled with emotion. "When I first saw your ships, I thought it was just another distraction. I didn't understand why you were here. But now I see. You didn't just save us from the storm. You saved us from our own fears." Carter's gaze softened, and he placed a hand on her shoulder. "We didn't do it alone, Vera. You were there every step of the way. We saved each other." The wind gently rustled through the trees, and for a moment, there was nothing but peace. The world around them was healing, not just from the damage caused by the solar storms, but from the wounds of distrust and fear that had plagued the Exilari for so long. The stars began to appear in the night sky, brighter than ever before. The same stars that had once seemed so far away, unreachable, now felt like they were within reach. Vera could feel the change deep within her. She had never imagined that such a transformation was possible. But here she was, standing with a human ally, surrounded by a people who had once believed that they were beyond hope. The Exilari weren't just surviving anymore. They were thriving. The crops were being harvested, the cities were coming back to life, and the people were beginning to believe in a future they hadn't dared dream of before. It was a future they would build together, with the humans as their allies, not just their saviors. As Vera and Carter stood together, watching the stars above, Vera felt a sense of deep pride. The Exilari had been abandoned, but now they had a chance to rebuild, to grow, and to become part of something greater than they had ever known. "There's still so much to do," she said, breaking the silence. "But for the first time, I feel like we can do it. We can actually build something. Together." Carter smiled, looking out at the horizon. "Yes, we can. And together, we'll make sure no one is ever left behind again." The night seemed to shine brighter than it ever had, and for the first time in a long while, Vera believed that the future held more than just survival. It held the promise of a better tomorrow, built by the hands of both the Exilari and the humans. The day had finally arrived. The Exilari had rebuilt their cities, their fields were flourishing, and their energy grid was up and running. The solar farms, the wind turbines, and the newly constructed power stations hummed with life. And the people of Sealer were filled with a new sense of hope. The once desolate planet was now a thriving symbol of what could be accomplished when two species came together with shared purpose. Vera Solon stood in the heart of the capital, watching as the Exilari and humans worked side by side to prepare for the final phase of the planet's restoration. The streets were alive with activity. Children played in the fields, the markets were bustling with goods, and people were laughing. For the first time in a long while, Vera felt like Sealer was truly her home again. Captain Elias Carter walked up beside her, his face reflecting the same sense of pride that she felt. "Look at this, Vera. It's amazing. It's everything we hoped for and more." Vera smiled, but there was still a hint of sadness in her eyes. "It is amazing, Elias, but it's not just the buildings or the technology. It's the spirit of the people. They're no longer just surviving. They're living. And that's what matters." For months, they had worked tirelessly, and now, the Exilari were starting to rebuild their society. They had faced great challenges together, and they had come through them stronger, wiser, and more united. The humans had taught them new ways to harness energy, grow food, and live in harmony with their planet. But more importantly, they had shown the Exilari that they were not alone in the universe. As the final touches were being put on the energy stations and farms, a grand ceremony was held to mark the official recovery of Sealer. Vera, along with Captain Carter and other leaders from both species, stood at the front of the crowd. The Exilari people gathered in the square, their faces filled with hope and excitement. The humans, many of whom had stayed on the planet to help rebuild, were also there, standing proudly among their new allies. The ceremony began with speeches from both human and Exilari leaders. Vera was the first to speak, her voice carrying through the crowd. "Today, we stand here together, not as two different species, but as partners. When the storm came, it took everything from us. It took our homes, our families, and our hopes. But together, we have rebuilt. Together, we have shown the galaxy that we are stronger than any force that tries to tear us apart." The crowd erupted in applause. Vera's heart swelled with pride as she looked out at the people who had once lost all hope. But now, their eyes shone with the brightness of a new future. Captain Elias Carter and the humans did not just save us from disaster. They showed us what it means to trust again. They reminded us that we are not alone in the universe, and because of that, we will never again stand in the darkness. As Vera stepped down from the podium, Captain Carter took her place. His words were simple but filled with sincerity. "Thank you, Vera, and thank you, Zealer, for welcoming us into your home. We came here as strangers, but now we leave as family. We may not have been able to stop the storm that nearly destroyed you, but we stood by you through the worst of it. And we will continue to stand by you as you rebuild, grow, and flourish." The crowd cheered again, louder this time. The bond between the humans and the Exilari was undeniable, and the future now seemed full of endless possibilities. As the ceremony drew to a close, Vera and Captain Carter found themselves standing side by side once more, watching the celebration unfold before them. The Exilari were dancing, singing, and laughing. The streets were filled with lights, music, and joy. It was the beginning of something new, something beautiful. "This is just the start," Carter said, looking at the scene around them. "This is only the beginning of a new chapter for Exilar, and for us." Vera nodded, her heart full. "We've come a long way, Elias, and together, we'll keep going farther." The stars above sparkled brightly in the night sky, and for the first time in a long while, Vera felt no fear. Zealer had risen from the ashes, stronger than ever before. And it wasn't just the planet that had changed, it was the people. They had learned that they were capable of so much more than they had ever imagined. In the distance, the sound of laughter and music echoed into the night. The Exilarian humans had come together to rebuild a world that had once seemed lost, and as they looked toward the future, they knew one thing for certain: their journey together had only just begun.